I thought I knew everything about Caleb. After 11 months together, then the night before our anniversary, I discovered his secret work project was actually secret dates with his ex. But here's what he didn't know about me. I'd been keeping a much bigger secret myself. You know, that feeling when your life seems absolutely perfect. When you wake up every morning thinking you finally figured it all out. That was me 6 months ago. My name is Sienna, and I thought I was living in a fairy tale with the man I was going to marry. Caleb and I had been together for almost a year, and everything felt like it was falling into place. He was this charming marketing manager with the most infectious laugh. The kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and left little notes in your lunch bag. Our apartment was this cozy little space downtown, where we'd spend Sunday mornings making pancakes and arguing about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. He said no, I said absolutely yes, and somehow that felt like the biggest problem we'd ever face. But here's the thing about fairy tales. They are built on secrets. And I was keeping the biggest secret of my life from the man I loved 6 months earlier. My grandmother had passed away, and when the lawyers finished sorting through her estate, I inherited $2.3 million. $2.3 million. I still get goosebumps saying that number out loud. My sweet, quiet grandmother, who lived in that tiny house with the rose garden, had been quietly investing in stocks for 50 years. And she left it all to me. I should have told Caleb immediately, right? That's what you're thinking. But here's the thing. I'd been broke my entire adult life. I'd watched relationships crumble over money, seen friends change when someone came into cash, and I'd heard every story about people who suddenly had family and lovers crawling out of the woodwork. I wanted to know that Caleb loved me for me, not for what I could give him. So I kept living in our little apartment, kept my job as a graphic designer, kept splitting dinner bills, and pretended that my biggest financial worry was student loans. The money just sat there in a separate account waiting. I told myself I'd tell him after our 1-year anniversary. That seemed like the right milestone, the moment when I could be sure about us. But then things started changing, and not in the way I expected. It began with little things. Caleb started coming home later from work, claiming he was stuck on this massive new project for a client he'd be on his phone more. Stepping into the other room to take calls, saying it was boring work, stuff I wouldn't be interested in. The man who used to tell me about every ridiculous email from his boss suddenly became Mr. Mysterious about his job. The late nights turned into missed dinners. The missed dinners turned into cancelled date nights. Our anniversary was supposed to be this big celebration at Motello's, the Italian place where we had our first official date. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, had even bought this gorgeous black dress that made me feel like $1 million, literally, as it turned out. But 2 weeks before our anniversary, Caleb started acting like he was carrying the weight of the world. He'd stare at his phone with this stressed expression, run his hands through his hair, and mumble about deadlines and client demands. When I'd try to massage his shoulders or ask if I could help somehow, he'd just give me this tight smile and say everything was fine. Everything was not fine. I could feel it in my bones, the way you can sense a storm coming before you see the clouds. There was this distance growing between us, like he was slowly pulling away, even when we were in the same room. And the worst part, I started wondering if he could somehow sense my secret. If maybe he knew about the money and was pulling back because of it. I never imagined that. The secret destroying our relationship wasn't mine. It was his, and it was so much worse than anything I could have prepared for. The day before our anniversary, I came home early from work with this stupid, romantic idea. I was going to surprise Caleb with his favorite Thai takeout, and maybe we could actually talk about whatever was eating at him. I wanted my boyfriend back. I wanted us back, but when I walked into our apartment, I heard his voice coming from the bedroom, and he was laughing, actually laughing. I hadn't heard him laugh like that in weeks. My heart lifted for a second, thinking maybe the project stress was finally over, until I heard him say, "I can't wait to see you tonight. Tessa, it feels like we never broke up." Tessa, his ex-girlfriend Tessa. I stood there in our hallway, Thai food getting cold in my hands, listening to the man I loved make plans with, the woman who broke his heart 2 years ago, The woman he'd spent months getting over when we first started dating. The woman whose name he'd accidentally called me once during sex, then spent the entire night apologizing. I should have walked in there immediately. I should have demanded answers. Instead, I did something that changed everything. I waited until he fell asleep and I looked through his laptop. I know invasion of privacy. Breach of trust, all those things your mother tells you never to do. But sitting there at 2 a.m., scrolling through months of messages between Caleb and Tessa, I realized I was already living in a relationship built on lies. She'd reached out to him 3 months ago, right around the time his behavior started changing. I made a mistake, she'd written. I think about you every day, and Caleb. My faithful, loving Caleb had eaten it up like a starving man. The messages were a timeline of betrayal. Coffee dates that were supposed to be closure, conversations, lunch meetings that turned into afternoon hotel visits, work trips that weren't work trips at all, every late night, every cancelled dinner. Every time he told me he was too stressed to talk, he was with her, but it was the most recent message that made me physically sick. Tomorrow's our anniversary dinner at Marcello's. He'd written to her just hours earlier. Can you believe she picked the same restaurant where we had our last date before you left? It's like the universe is telling me something. I'll call you when I'm there, and find an excuse to leave early. He was planning to abandon me on our anniversary, to leave me sitting alone at our special restaurant so he could run to her. I've never felt rage like that before. It was this hot, consuming thing that started in my chest and spread through my entire body until my hands were shaking and I couldn't breathe properly. I wanted to wake him up and scream until my voice gave out. I wanted to throw his laptop against the wall. I wanted to call Tessa and tell her exactly what kind of man she was stealing. But instead I sat there in the dark planning. By morning, I'd made my decision. I was going to give Caleb exactly what he wanted, the chance to choose between us. But I was going to make sure he understood exactly what that choice cost him. The next evening, I put on that black dress and my brightest smile. And we went to Marcello's like nothing had happened. Caleb was nervous, fidgety, checking his phone every few minutes. When it finally rang and he gave me that apologetic look, I just smiled and said, "Take it, baby. I understand." I watched him walk outside to take his work call, and then I followed him. There she was, standing under the streetlight like some tragic heroine, and when Caleb reached her, they fell into each other like they'd been apart for years instead of hours. They kissed right there on the sidewalk. And in that moment, watching the man I loved choose someone else, something inside me broke completely. But something else was born too. Something cold and calculating, and absolutely done with being the fool in this story. I walked right up to them, and the look of pure terror on Caleb's face when he saw me was almost worth the heartbreak, almost. "Well, isn't this romantic?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady for someone whose world had just imploded. "Don't let me interrupt your reunion." Tessa had the audacity to smirk at me. Actually smirk, this woman who had stolen my boyfriend, ruined my anniversary and destroyed my future, had the nerve to look satisfied. "Sienna," she said, like we were old friends bumping into each other at the grocery store. "Caleb was just telling me how unhappy you two have been." The slap happened before I even realized my hand was moving. The sound echoed off the restaurant windows, and suddenly half the street was staring at us. Tessa stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. And for the first time, she looked less than perfectly composed. "You lying, pathetic excuse for a woman," I heard myself saying, and my voice was getting louder with each word, "unhappy. We were planning our future together while you were sending him pictures of lingerie." Caleb tried to step between us, his face flushed and panicked. "Sienna, please let me explain." Explain what I whirled on him. And all that rage I'd been swallowing for months came pouring out. "Explain how you've been lying to me for 3 months. Explain how you plan to abandon me tonight. Explain how you threw away everything we built for this piece of work." People were definitely staring now, some even taking out their phones, but I didn't care. Let them record it. Let the whole world see what Caleb really was. We argued right there on the sidewalk, like some trashy reality show. Voices escalating, accusations flying. Caleb kept trying to minimize it, calling it a mistake and complicated, while Tessa stood there acting like the victim. When he finally grabbed my arm and suggested we go home to talk privately, I actually laughed home. I said, "You mean the apartment? Where you've been lying to my face every single day? Where you pretended to love me while texting her? No thanks, but here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a surprisingly clear view of everything above you walking away from that disaster." I realized I had something neither of them knew about. Something that was about to make this betrayal the most expensive mistake of Caleb's life. I spent the next 2 weeks pretending to consider forgiving him. I let him grovel, let him promise it was over with Tessa. Let him talk about couples therapy and starting fresh. And while he was busy trying to convince me he was worth keeping, I was busy discovering just how much he wasn't. See, heartbreak makes you thorough. I went through everything: his browser history, his email, his social media, and that's when I found his research into engagement rings, expensive ones. The kind that cost more than his annual salary. The kind that someone would need significant financial backing to afford. My sweet, cheating boyfriend had been planning to propose with. What money, I wondered. His credit cards were maxed out from all those hotels with Tessa. His savings account had maybe $3,000. But there he was bookmarking $15,000 rings and researching the best jewelry stores in the city. That's when it hit me: he'd been waiting for me to tell him about the inheritance somehow. Some way he'd figured out I had money. And he'd been playing a long game. The cheating, the lies, the emotional distance. It was all part of some twisted strategy to keep me interested while he figured out how to cash in. The revelation should have hurt more. But honestly, by then my heart was so broken that learning my boyfriend was also a gold digger felt almost anticlimactic. Like finding out the guy who rear-ended you was also drunk. Just another layer of awful on an already terrible situation. But it also gave me the most beautiful idea for revenge I'd ever conceived. I called them both and asked them to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. I need to understand what happened, I told Caleb, and I want to hear it from both of you, so I can decide what to do next. They showed up looking uncomfortable but hopeful. Caleb kept reaching for my hand across the table, while Tessa sat there trying to look apologetic, but mostly just looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. I have something to tell you both. I began pulling out my phone. Something that's going to change how you see this whole situation. And then I showed them my bank balance, $2.3 million. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. I will never forget the exact moment Caleb's face changed. It was like watching someone get hit by lightning. His eyes went wide, then wider, and all the color drained from his cheeks until he looked like he might actually pass out there in the coffee shop. What is this?" he whispered, staring at my phone screen like it might bite him. "This," I said, my voice calm as still water, "is my inheritance from my grandmother. The one I've been sitting on for 6 months, waiting to tell the man I loved after our anniversary. The anniversary you ruined to be with her." Tessa leaned forward to look at the screen, and I watched her face go through the same transformation: shock, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like physical pain as the reality sank in $2.3 million. I continued, letting each word hang in the air. "That's what you walked away from, Caleb. That's what you chose her." Over the next few minutes were chaos. Caleb started stammering, reaching across the table, trying to grab my hands, while words tumbled out of his mouth faster than his brain could organize them. "Sienna, baby, please. You don't understand. It didn't mean anything. She doesn't mean anything. I love you. I choose you. We can work this out." But I wasn't done yet. I had one more card to play. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, standing up from the table. "I've already put a deposit down on a house, a beautiful house with a garden and a home office, where I can start my own design company. I'm moving out of our apartment this weekend, and I'm taking my future with me." Caleb was on his feet now, desperation making his voice crack. "You can't just leave. We can fix this. Think about what we could have together. What we could have had together, I corrected him, was honesty. But you chose lies instead. You chose her instead. And now you get to live with that choice. That's when Tessa, who had been sitting there in stunned silence, finally found her voice. Caleb. She said slowly, "Did you know about the money?" The look he gave her could have melted steel. "Of course I didn't know. Do you think I would have if I had known?" He trailed off, realizing exactly how that sounded. Would have what? Tessa's voice was getting sharper. Would have chosen differently, would have picked the millionaire over me. And just like that, their perfect reunion started cracking apart in real time. I sat back down to watch the show. "That's not what I meant," Caleb said. But we all knew it was exactly what he meant. God, Sienna. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to love me for me," I said. Turns out I got my answer. Within 10 minutes they were arguing with each other. Instead of trying to win me back, Tessa accused Caleb of being a gold digger. Caleb accused Tessa of manipulating him into throwing away his future. It was beautiful in a twisted way. Watching them turn on each other the second they realized what they'd lost. I left them there still fighting. And walked out into the most beautiful afternoon of my life. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my new house. The one with the garden and the home office. Just like I promised, my design company is thriving. Funded by a woman who knew her worth and finally decided to live like it. I wake up every morning in a space that's entirely mine. Filled with things I chose, and I've never been happier. Caleb tried calling for months. He sent flowers, showed up at my old job. Even had his mother call me once to check on how I was doing. I block him everywhere and change my number. Last week I heard through a mutual friend that he's engaged to some other woman he met on a dating app 3 months. And is already trying to lock down his next meal ticket. But here's my favorite part of this whole story. The final twist that makes everything perfect. Remember how I said he threw away his future for Tessa? Well, she broke up with him exactly 1 week after our coffee shop confrontation. Apparently, finding out your boyfriend would dump you for money really kills the romance and me. I'm dating someone new now. Someone who knew about my inheritance from day one because I told him on our second date. Someone who insisted we split the check anyway because he wanted to contribute equally to what we are building together. His name is Marcus, and he used to be Caleb's best friend. Funny how life works out some.